I think we will get started. Just to let everybody know, the meeting is being recorded and it will appear on our website after several days after this meeting. I want to welcome everybody who's on and who's coming on and ask people to please mute themselves if possible, if you're not speaking, and then unmute. Remember to unmute if you want to say something. You can always put a question or a comment in the chat, and the chat will pop up to everybody who's probably not on their phone. Everybody will be able to see that. So thank you for coming to the August general meeting of the Gpica. I'm Helen Fox, the current president, and we're going to start our meeting tonight with the minutes of the June meeting. And I will share my screen here. And I'm just going to go over this very briefly. We met on June 1st. The meeting was held over Zoom. The treasurer's report, you can see there. You'll see more of the treasurer's report tonight, if it's more up to date. Mike Sweeney, the treasurer, who is also the member who is on the Mixed Use Path Committee, gave us an update on this idea, a proposed path that bikers and walkers would share that would go right from the four-way stop all the way to Burnt Store. And although there's a lot probably that will have to happen before that actually comes into reality.
Individuals, including 11 women.
Okay, so somebody's television or radio is on. And everyone will kindly mute themselves. Otherwise, I'll need to mute everybody, and I don't want to have to do that. Okay, so on to the traffic issues. We did send a letter to the Lee County Department of Transportation.
I'll turn this up. You can turn the up.
Telling them about all of our traffic problems and giving some suggestions as to what might solve them. We'll talk a little bit more about that tonight, so I'm not going to go through those. The public hearing about the new Publix at that point, and the June meeting had been postponed, but as you all probably know, it was later held. And if you came to that meeting, you learned all about the things they were asking for. We'll talk a bit about that a bit later tonight. The kayak launch site, or the proposed new kayak launch site across from the Flamingo Bay development, we tried to have a public informational meeting about that, but audio difficulties prevented that meeting from taking place fully. And so we're going to reschedule that meeting and have it again and have it in person. We'll talk about that later as well. At that time, we were going to go on a tour of the wastewater treatment plant, and we invited people to come. We actually did that, and we had a stinking good time, I guess I would say. We talked a little bit about the Pine Island Pandemic Task Force. That includes our island's physician, one of them, Dr. Daniel Hanley, and that he was willing and able to give vaccinations to anyone, even if they weren't his patient, if they would get an appointment. The new payment schedule for joining the Gpica was discussed. That will take effect on October 1st. And another thing we're going to talk about tonight, the proposal for the Septic to Sewer Committee and what they're doing, but they had started to meet at that time. And finally, we talked a bit about the Rights of Nature Initiative, including the need to get a proposal on the ballot as a way of cleaning up our waters. Okay. Is there a motion to approve these minutes? Thank you, Mike. Is there a second? Will somebody second that motion? I can't see you, so you'll have to speak up if you're.
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you, Tori. Is there any discussion? Okay, without discussion, let's vote. All in favor of approving the minutes, please either put thumbs up or say aye.
Aye. Aye.
I think you better say, yeah. Those of you who are going to say aye, you need to unmute yourself or put a yes or an aye in the chat.
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Okay, the ayes have it. Thank you. All right. So now, yeah, go ahead. Okay. So now we will have the treasurer's report of the last 2 months coming from Mike, our treasurer, Mike Sweeney. Mike, go ahead and unmute yourself and share your screen.
I've lost my mouse. This has been happening regularly with me here.
My goodness.
If I can go up to the preferences here. I'm sorry, I can't share it with you right now.
Can you
until I recover them? I can read it to you, sure.
Okay, go ahead and just read it.
Okay, well, there was not a meeting in for the June because we would have had that 1st of July or that time period. But since we didn't have a meeting, the June report, basically for the money market account, there was $16,760.60. The business checking was $2,647.29. And the CD investment was $76,328.47. That hasn't changed. The money that we spent out was $75, and that was to rent the Mango Mania table from the Chamber of Commerce. And the money that came in was $70 in membership dues. For July, the money market account was increased by a total of 14 cents to 16,760.74 cents.
Oh no.
The business checking was up considerably. It was up to 3,051.02 cents. And I'll explain why that is in a minute. The CD investment stayed exactly the same, 76,328.47. The money in, we got $550 in membership dues. We got 2 people, and Claudia can clap for that. 2 people that Claudia suggested become full-time members, lifetime members, excuse me. So, and then we got an additional $50 from other members. So for 2 people, it's 300 per person or 500 for a couple. And then the July money out, the only thing that we spent was for the Gpica brochures, which are Nadine's creation, and they're fantastic. I mean, they really talk all about the Gpica. So that's the treasurer's report. Any questions?
Yeah, any questions or comments about the treasurer's report? Please remember to unmute yourself if you want to make a comment or ask a question. Okay, I'm looking in the chat. And I'm not seeing anything, so we will move right along. Thank you, Mike. So if you came to the community meeting on June 29th at the Methodist Church regarding the new Publix and associated townhomes, thank you for your involvement and interest in protecting our island from overdevelopment. At that community meeting, many people voiced their objections to the details of the project, including the proposed structures, the traffic that the new businesses and homes will create, the request to allow a new liquor store closer to the elementary school than regulations allow, and so on. After the meeting, the GPICA received letters from some of you outlining your objections. Thank you for doing that. We've sent these along to the appropriate Lee County staff, along with our own letter that says, in no uncertain terms, that Pine Islanders are opposed to the changes requested by the developers of that property. We believe these letters let the county know that we are involved, we are watching, and that we intend to make a difference. You can find our letter to the Lee County staff on the GPICA website, which is gpica.org. One thing to keep in mind, however, we realize we have not adequately explained that a very unusual, for me anyway, since I'm not a native Floridian, law that says that the public cannot contact county commissioners directly on any issue involving zoning. You're likely to get wrapped on the knuckles or worse if you try it. This is a strange law since it's obvious from the records of county commissioner meetings that developers and their lawyers speak directly to commissioners on zoning issues all the time. But the public is not allowed to do so. So that's just on zoning issues. You can contact them on anything else but zoning. Another thing we learned from your comments and from our own confusion about how development works on Pine Island is that we all need a better understanding of real estate basics, kind of a development 101. So tonight we have two presentations for you. I will start by giving a brief overview of what the Pine Island plan says about development.
Figure out how to get it on Apple TV.
Okay, Susan, I'm gonna mute your phone there. Okay, I will start by giving a brief overview of what the Pine Island plan says about development, what it protects, what it restricts, and what it cannot regulate at all. Then Noel Andrus will follow with a presentation that takes us step by step through the process that a developer must go through in order to legally build commercial and multifamily structures on Greater Pine Island, and where we, the public, can have the most impact in preventing things we don't like and encouraging things that we do. So now I'm going to start by sharing my, I'm going to screen share my PowerPoint. And okay, let's see if this works. There we go. Oh, I gotta move you guys somewhere else. All right, so this is development on Greater Pine Island. So in 1987, Pine Island residents developed a comprehensive land use plan for the island. After numerous community meetings and much argument and advocacy, the Pine Island plan was approved by the state of Florida and adopted by Lee County in 1988. It can now be found as part of the Lee County Land Development Code. The plan faced various challenges over the last 35 years, and residents have always rallied to save it. While we haven't always been completely successful, many of the original provisions still stand today. So I'm going to take you through a few of those in general, a few of those provisions, certainly not all of them because there are so many of them. Keeping our outstanding environment safe from overdevelopment has always been central to our quality of life. The plan provides some key protections. For example, no new canals or new artificial channels can be created within 1 mile of Pine Island. Developers must preserve or create a 50-foot wide native buffer in any new development, rezoning, or agricultural land that adjoins aquatic preserves or wetlands. The county pledges to protect seagrass beds and continue to buy environmentally sensitive areas, the eagle nesting areas, and archaeological and historical sites for preservation. There are other protections. You can read them in detail in the section of the Lee County Development Code, the fields with Pine Island.
I think is it on our website too?
You can get to the Pine Island plan from our website. But if you want to look at, the Pine Island plan itself, which is now part of the Lee County plan, is rather general. If you want to get to the specifics of it, you need to go into the land use plan, into Lee County Land Development Code that deals with Pine Island. Okay, so the plan restricts building height and size. And so this is what we don't want to look like, right? This is Marco Island. Well, of course, they're out on the open water, but if all our mangroves were gone and high rises were allowed, that's what Pine Island would look like as well. So according to the plan, the maximum building height on Pine Island is about 3 stories. That is 35 feet above the ground or 45 feet above mean sea level, whichever is lower. So if this restriction wasn't in place, we can imagine how quickly the island would be built up with condominiums all around our natural shorelines. In addition, the county provides specific design standards that support the coastal rural character of much of the island. You'll notice, for example, the fire department in Matlacha, as you come onto the island, when you come into Matlacha, is painted in tropical colors and is surrounded by native plants. Additionally, all the new buildings are to be kept to a reasonable square footage that is specifically detailed in the code. The plan also restricts the density of new homes. Now, just to be clear, this is not a new home. This is my home. And this home was one of the ones that was plotted in before the Pine Island plan. It was built before the Pine Island plan put restrictions on the size of the lots that you had to have. We ended up buying the lot next door in order to restore some of the native plants. This is one of the more controversial aspects of the plan, and one that has been challenged and changed over the years. Currently, I believe the standard maximum density in the areas designated as coastal rural on our island, and Noel can correct me if I'm wrong, is 1 development unit per 2.7 acres for new construction. And this density can be increased where 70% of the parcel is maintained as native or restored habitat or is agricultural. And then residential developments with 10 or more development units per acre must be approved through rezoning and must show design standards that maintain the coastal rural character. These specifics and many more can be found in the Lee County Plan and the Lee County Land Development Code. So outside Pine Island Center, the plan limits commercial development to certain kinds of businesses. Now in the center, the plan encourages commercial development. The idea is that if we have businesses that here on the island that serve most of our needs, we won't have to go off island so often, and that would cut down, presumably, on the traffic problem during season. But outside of Pine Island Center, development is restricted to businesses that preserve the island's character, like marinas, fish houses, bait shops, and the like, as well as minor commercial establishments like restaurants, print shops, art galleries, and so on. Unfortunately, the plan no longer restricts development based on traffic to and from the island. We did try. By we, I mean the GPICA tried long before I came to live on the island. And this is the controversial 810-910 rule. So the 810-910 rule, which was part of the Pine Island Plan originally, restricted rezonings to commercial development when traffic count through Mount Lachey reached 810 annual two-way trips. And when the traffic count through Mount Lachey reached 910 annual two-way trips, it prohibited new residential development. And that was the one I think that was really controversial and really fought. But what happened to that? In 2013, the 810-910 rule, or as it was called, smart growth, was gutted by Governor Scott, who said a development order cannot be denied based on road conditions. What's more, and this is something that I just learned, and I found it rather shocking. The plan does not limit development orders that were approved before 1998. And in fact, 13,000 development orders for new homes have been grandfathered in on Pine Island. Now, this of course is not Pine Island. This is the villages up north of us. But you know, this is what we don't want to look like. So these are old development orders that were approved before the Pine Island Plan went into effect. And they have been renewed every 5 years, year after year. So they remain a possibility for developers to simply start building homes on. So the question is, now, what can we do? Where can we intervene? How much influence do we have? And how can we be most effective? So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to now ask Noel Andrus to explain how the development process works on Pine Island. So I guess Nadine is going to put up the PowerPoint for Noel. And so Noel has been a real estate developer in Lee County and other counties in Southwest Florida for many years. And he's the most knowledgeable person we know about how development works. He'll explain what developers must do to get their projects on Pine Island approved and where citizens can be involved. So go ahead then.
Okay, a developer takes a look at Pine Island and decides they want to do a project on Pine Island. The first thing they're going to look for is they're going to look for what is the classification in the future land use map. The future land use map, every county in the state of Florida, 67 counties, were required back in the early 1970s to come up with a comprehensive land use plan. And in that comprehensive land use plan, each county is split up into major categories. It's very general. And one of the categories that we have on Pine Island, most of the property out here, when we redid the plan the last time, we adopted a whole new designation that's nowhere else in Lee County, and that's called Coastal Rural Designation. So that's the future land use map category. And within that category, you're allowed to do certain types of development. And this is the area that we've had the most controversy, because at that time, all of Pine Island was in a category of land that allowed for one home on 1 acre. So the whole island could have been divided up into 1 acre lots. And so that's what led to lawsuits when the density changed. And so when we amended the land use plan the last time, we had a compromise, and the compromise was based on the time it takes to evacuate the island in case of a hurricane. And based on that, we felt like the attorneys that the county hired from Tampa, who are specialists in this type of law, that we could defend this in court. So it was one house on 2.7 acres, and that's where we're at today. So the coastal rural category was created specifically out here because we have unique problems to deal with, and we can't build a new bridge. But you can find all of the details about the different
Bridge.
development requirements in Article 3 of the Lee County Land Development Code. The Land Development Code is the nuts and bolts of your comprehensive plan. Your comprehensive plan is very broad, very general, and then what you drill down to a lower level to where you talk about specifically what you can do, and that's the Land Development Code. And on the island, we have some specific characteristics to the island. One is residential. It limits that development to 1 unit per 2.7 acres. And if you're going to go ahead and go back to the original category of 1 unit per acre, then you have to set up a conservation easement and leave 70% of the land has to remain an open space. And that open space has to be maintained. There has to be an entity that's going to take ownership of it and maintain the space. So it's just not a piece of property that just goes back to Melaleuca and different Brazilian pepper and exotic vegetation. So all of that has to be maintained as part of your development. And so once you get your future land use map determination, you decide, well, I want to do a commercial project here. This property is commercial in the future land use map. Then the next thing you take a look at is the zoning. Back in the early 80s, the county went around and changed the future land use map throughout the whole county. And they never bothered to change the zoning so it matched the new future land use map designation. So we have a lot of areas out here on Pine Island that are zoned commercial, but you really, with the future land use map being the way it is, you couldn't develop commercial there. So that was a problem that we have to deal with because the county never did deal with that problem. And so a person buys a piece of property and it's zoned residential and his future land use map is commercial. So then he has to have either a future land use map amendment, which is a very costly procedure, and it's the most time consuming of all of the applications. So they really don't want to buy a piece of property that doesn't have the right future land use map designation. And then because it's much easier to change the zoning. But if they buy a piece of property and they have to change the zoning, then that triggers public hearings. So what happens is the person that wants to develop that property submits an application to the county. And the county requires a transportation study, requires an environmental study, requires a wetland study. So there's numerous studies the county requires before that property can be developed. And so they have to have all of those in, plus an engineered site drawing of what the lots are going to look like. They submit that to the county, and the county says, well, you checked all the boxes, so therefore you can move forward in your project. But one of the boxes they have to check is a public informational meeting on Pine Island. So that's one of the things they have to do as part of their requirement. So that's where the public gets an opportunity to have their first look at something that's being proposed to be developed on the island. So it's important to come to these meetings, make your opinions and your thoughts known so that the GPICA can put those into a letter to notify the county planning department, here are our concerns, and that becomes a part of their public record, their file that they submit the county staff to a hearing examiner. Now the hearing examiner, when there's a zoning change, anybody that goes and testifies before that hearing examiner is a person of record. And so therefore later on, when the county commissioners have a public hearing for the final vote, you're allowed to attend that meeting and speak. But if you don't go to the first meeting, you're not allowed to speak to the Board of County Commissioners. So it's very important. The first opportunity is the public information meeting. The next is once that file is considered sufficient, then it's submitted and a public hearing date is set. Now we will be notified on the island the date and time and place of that public hearing. And that's where we let everybody know, please come in and tell the county what you think about this project. So at that time, the hearing examiner takes our testimony and puts it all into a record and makes a recommendation to the county commissioners. When the county commissioners get that recommendation, they don't have to approve based on the recommendation of the hearing examiner. They can vote contrary to that decision. So once they have all that done, then the county commissioner takes a final public hearing, takes all of our testimony, and then makes a vote on whether or not to approve the project. And then once the project is approved by the county commissioners, it has another opportunity. It has to go back to the state, and the state will take a look at the and see if it meets all of the future land use map requirements. And if it does, then the the State Department is called Department of Economic Opportunity. If it meets those requirements after that review, they approve the decision by the county commissioners. The county commissioners have 30 days to schedule a final meeting, and then the owner of the project, he can begin work on the project after that period of time. So it's a lengthy project. It's probably a year and a half on most projects from the time they submit the first application till the end of the review process and the public hearing process. And the important thing is that you do have several opportunities for comment. One is at the very beginning of the public information meeting required on the island, and the next opportunity is at the public hearing, and the third opportunity is before the Board of County Commissioners. So I'd be happy to answer any questions anybody has.
No, I have a question. Is it required that the entity that wants to build must have all of those studies done and the drawing done before they can have the public meeting?
No, they're not required to have that done before, because the public meeting is just part of that process, part of their packet.
Noel, maybe you could stop share, or Nadine could stop
I wanted to ask Noel to go over the automatic renewal of development orders before I stop the share.
Okay, good.
Okay,
Yeah.
What we're talking about on the island is we have a problem because it's very difficult to plan for what kind of infrastructure needs we're going to have in terms of road improvement, what types of sewer improvement we need on the island, and what types of water system improvements we need, fire protection and so forth, if we don't know what kind of growth is coming for the island. And because we have over 13,000 already entitled properties on the island that they could build on, we think that there needs to be some kind of process where we could have an opportunity to have public comment, and the applicant would have to bring their project up to today's standards, because something approved in 1988 was approved under a whole different set of guidelines. And so that's the problem with the automatic renewals, is that we saw this over there with the gas station site, the new gas station. That site had been already approved for greater density than they developed on the site. So it was very easy because they used the state of Florida has a expedited process, which is the 8653, which is based on density, where if you're lowering the density less than what was approved originally, like if you had 100,000 square feet of commercial, and now you're only building 50,000 square feet of commercial, well, that's a reduce in density. So therefore, you don't have to go through the whole public hearing process again, that all you do is just a simple plan change, which is reviewed by staff. And so that's where we have a problem is there's no review by the public. There's conditions that are placed on these developments that don't comply with current day standards. So we have a lot of those on the island. And one of the directions we need to go is contact our county commissioners and ask if there can't be an amendment in that process whereby before it's renewed for another 5 years, that there be a review of it, and it has to come into compliance with all the current regulations.
Okay, I see a question in the chat. What does it mean if you purchased a lot that is under the 2.7 acres or the 1 acre? Would you not be able to build a home?
And if what happened was when the Growth Management Planning Act came into Florida in like around 1974, all of the lots that were platted prior to that time were grandfathered in. So like you could take Sundial up in the Bocilla area, or in the Pineland area, those lots are they are 50 foot wide by 80 foot deep. So they're 4,000 square feet. That is a non-conforming lot, but yet you could get a permit to build a single family home on that lot. So if a lot was created after 1974 and was created legally, then even though it might be less than an acre, you could still get a building permit to build on.
Does that answer your question, Card? Okay. So other questions, you can raise your hand or you can put a question in the chat. All right, somebody said, can you please provide a bit more insight on earlier comments regarding public not contacting the Board of County Commissioners on application questions? Okay, so this is on zoning, specifically on zoning questions. And it would be Noel again, who could give us the insight on how that law came to be and who it favors and what we can and cannot do.
Okay, what happened back in the 1980s, the gold rush days for the folks that were pretty much in Fort Myers at that time that were running everything. A couple of the county commissioners wound up having to go to prison for some of the, they were being provided like prostitutes and boat trips and stuff like that. And so they were criminally by developers, and they were criminally prosecuted. And so it became, the county commissioners were getting so heavily lobbied that they decided that they would pass an ordinance that prohibits any communication with a county commissioner on any rezoning change. And we're the only county out of 67 counties that has that law. And so it's a felony. So you don't want to do it.
Yeah, and if you do it, you usually get like a stern reminder.
Warning.
You don't get somebody appearing at your door with handcuffs, but it is something to take seriously. I see another question in the chat. Would incorporating give the island more say and control over these developments? Yeah, I mean, that brings up the whole question of incorporation, which we have, we've kind of put on hold at this point. Yes, some people really do see that if you're your own town, you get to make the rules about that town. And so you don't have to go to the county commission for all these questions. So presumably it could give you more say and control, but that would depend on who you would elect to be your political, oops, I'm just taking a look here. All right, so Nadine has put in the chat the actual wording from the Lee County Land Development Code that talks about communicating with a commissioner. unlawful, it says. It doesn't say it's a felony, but it's unlawful for sure. As a result, your email is an unauthorized communication. Yeah. So what you do is you contact the Department of Community Development staff instead of the county commissioners to discuss zoning issues, or you can write us a letter. You can send it to info@gpica.org. Am I right, Nadine? And then we will pass on your comments to the appropriate department so that you don't get wrapped on the knuckles for doing something that you had no idea you weren't supposed to be doing.
But Helen, that too apply, just for clarity, even if it was forwarded on to the Civic Association, that has to go to the department, not direct to the commissioners.
Absolutely, absolutely. We would not be able to send it directly to commissioners, just like anybody else. That is absolutely true. So here is the phone number for the Community Development Department. And that way you can find out which staff members are reviewing which development orders, or where you should direct your comments about particular development. But if you don't want to go to that length yourself, send your comments to GPICA and we will direct it to the appropriate department.
Ellen, I also want to point out, I'm going to be posting the PowerPoint that Noel just did to our website.
Yeah.
And it has the Lee County Community Development Department phone number in it. It also has websites where you can go online and search Lee County records for developments and development orders. Yeah. So that'll be posted on our website tomorrow.
Okay. Yeah, because part of the issue is we know that there are 13,000 development orders sitting out there for single family homes, but we don't know about other, correct me if I'm wrong on this, Noel, but I don't believe we know anything about development orders for multifamily homes or commercial developments. That's not so easy to find, but it can be found by doing some research. Is that the case, Noel?
That's exactly right, because I know when we were amending the plan, there was this big rush of property owners on the island, and there was a half a dozen or more projects that got passed before the plan took effect, like down towards the Bocilla area, where there were multifamily certain parcels that were created down in that area, and also down towards St. James City. There were several projects approved. So yes, someone in the Community Development Department, I think Claudia, has worked on this, and she knows how who to talk to there. But we need to research those and see when they're coming up for renewals, to try to see if there's any way we can provide comments.
The problem that I found doing what Noel just said is that our development orders are mixed in with all of the other development orders from Lee County. So there are thousands of them, and they are by date. So you have to go back to the very, very beginning and look for Lee County. And I found the department not very cooperative in trying to direct you to who is working on what development project. They just basically claim they can't do that.
So Claudia, if you went to the Lee County site and you searched for Pine Island, I mean, I found, if I'm looking at the right site, what I found narrowed it down. I mean, it was still 1,100 development orders, so it wasn't small, and it also included everything on unincorporated Pine Island Road, so that could be out in North Fort Myers or whatever.
And you have to specify dates too.
Yeah, okay. Because I was thinking
so you have to go back to the 70s.
One of the things that we might try to do is create a group of concerned citizens who are interested in helping with this and figuring out some way that we can start searching the county site to get this information. It's going to be time consuming. You have to download the documents before you can even look at them to see if it's applicable or not, but I don't know any other way to kind of get it going, other than we need a lot of people to
Have
work together.
I have a gentleman that I've been in contact with. He's out of town, but he's willing to get going on it. And he said he'd be happy to do it.
Okay.
Okay, so Deborah Swisher Hicks, you had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, I have found one other way of finding old orders is by going to Find My Property on the Lee County line, and you can bring up Pine Island, and it's a long process. You click on each piece of property that you see vacant, and it'll bring up the old developmental orders and so on. So there's one other way. I've also had really good luck of just doing a generic Pine Island development or something like that in their search bar, and found some really interesting stuff in the past, but that's something else.
So this is a project that we may get started, and that is to get some board members involved in starting this research, and anybody else who's interested in doing this, or if you know someone like Claudia does who might be interested, we'll collect the names and we'll get a committee together, because it seems like the more we know, the more power we will have, and the more we will be able to bring to eventually to commissioners to say, look, these rules, well, whatever we say, the rules are unfair, or whatever we want to say about that. So are there any other questions about either of these presentations?
I have one. Go ahead.
Okay, Claudia. Oh, sorry.
No, I'm just curious. We as citizens can't contact the commissioners, but the developers can. Is that correct?
Yep. Unfortunately, that is the case.
So how does that keep them from getting prostitutes and
right,
whatever?
Well, I don't know, because what you do is you schedule a meeting with all five of them, like one at 10 o'clock and one at 10:15 and so on. And you go right down the hallway and you talk to every one of them with your attorneys. That's how it works.
So,
go ahead.
I have, this is Tom. I have one additional question that I maybe Noel can comment on.
sure.
And that is any comments on the different rights or influence or right to speak, not in the public hearing, but how much consideration is given to the general public citizens, concerned citizens, as compared to strictly limiting that to adjacent or abutting property owners?
Well, I think that if you have a large number of people come, like we've always done in the past, we've had 20, 30 people come to these the hearing examiner's hearing and testify. And as long as you stick to specific concerns that can be documented within the document itself as a public concern for public safety and health, as long as you do that and not go in with emotional pleas, you're going to be very effective. I've seen people be very effective.
We had the the hearing officer overturn on the helicopter proposal that when that's the mosquito commission thing. The commission, they overturned that.
And then the tower too, the radar tower.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Very good.
I think the radar tower people withdrew their application.
Yes, they did. They realized
The opposition.
the opposition, and that they were out of bounds. And it's pretty clear. So there are a lot of ways that people can get involved. And I think Noel mentioned to speak with facts and to not get emotional at these, either in front of the commissioners or in front of the hearing examiner is very, very important. So people kind of have to practice, get their arguments together and state them in a very measured way. However, at the public information hearings, really, people are free to say whatever they want to say in whatever tone that they want to use, as they did at the last meeting about the Publix. However, the reason that we're doing these two presentations tonight is to make sure that people understand that there are certain things that we really can't have any influence on. For example, there were some people who said, we don't want any more development on Pine Island, or we don't want any outsiders coming in and putting up a liquor store. We don't want this or that. And that's not up for discussion. You know, that may be true. That may be what that person doesn't want. But if that were to be brought to commissioners, that would probably not help us, our case very, very much.
Well, see, that's important because like you said, the informational meeting is open to say anything or be as emotional as you want to be. It's really to come and air what you think. Whereas the public hearing before the hearing examiner is a quasi-judicial hearing, and it's run like you're in a court of law. And so it's a lot more formal.
Yeah, good point.
And I have one more suggestion, Helen. If you come to the meeting and you have it in writing and you can hand that in.
Mm-hmm. Good. So
Helen, it looks like Deb Swisher Hicks has a question. I'm not sure what it is, Deb.
Yeah, it's when is the next 5-year review to your plan to see
It should have been of the plan, sorry.
Of the plan to see if we can add the sunset of old development orders.
Every plan has a different date in it, and it's based on the approval date of the plan. So there's no two plans that probably have the same date. So that their 5-year period will vary from the 5 years they got approval.
Does that make sense?
That's why we need to go and look up every single development order and create a database so we know where they are in the process.
That's correct.
I don't see any other way to do it. I think if we tried to file a Freedom of Information Act with the county, they would charge us $1 million to do the record search for us.
Oh yeah.
If they would even do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so citizens can take action and can get involved in that committee, which I think we will form rather soon. Someone asked, Melissa asks, can we discuss the status of incorporating at a later date? I would like to know the status. Well, actually, we can talk just about the status rather than the pros and cons right now. Maybe somebody else has the exact dates at their fingertips, but my understanding is that, you know, there are a lot of steps that you have to go through in order to even get a question put on the ballot, where everybody would have a chance to vote yes or no for incorporation. There are a lot of steps that precede that. And the first step, I think, is your representative has to believe that there's enough positive sentiment for incorporation on the island in order to even introduce it into the legislature, because he's going to look rather silly if he goes to the trouble of introducing that and then people are really still arguing about it and they don't really want it. So that's the first thing, is really public education to get people to understand what incorporation would involve. There are a lot of questions about that, and we were working on that several years ago. But then there was going to be there had to be some way of gauging the interest of the people on the island in whether they might vote in favor of incorporation. And so there was going to be a question put on the ballot that would ask about that, which is confusing because it seems like you're actually voting on incorporation when in fact you're not. You're just gauging the interest of the islanders. That date has passed, as I understand. So it would be several years. Is that correct? Anybody who knows that? Several years before that question could be put on a ballot again.
I think it would take a couple of years, Helen, but I think the bigger issue from the Civic Association board had been that the community did not seem to want to support it. And so we decided that instead of staying focused on that issue, we would look at the individual issues. That's why we conducted a community survey, and we would find out what issues the community wanted to look at and wanted to address. And we would go through and begin trying to address them that way. That way, we're not even talking about incorporating at this time. So I think that's kind of where we are as a board currently.
Yeah. Does that answer your question, Melissa? You can put it in the chat, or you
yes,
can...
no, it does. I did. I thought I read somewhere that this was actually going to be on the ballot for 2022. That's why I was inquiring about it. So I just want to be clear if that's still happening or if it's not. But yeah, that did answer my question. Thank you.
Well, I think if we could get agreement with where we have a majority sentiment on the island, and we could get agreement with Matt Lachey that this is something that they think would benefit all of us to be together, then I think we could go to the commissioners. And one of the issues that I discussed with Commissioner Ruane was would he support us to put that on the ballot when he was running for commissioner? I said, you know, I'm willing to support you, but that's a very important issue for me. And he said, yes. He said that he supported it for Sanibel when he was, and then he served as the mayor for 16 years. And he thought that we should have the right to choose. And so he said, that, you know, not that he was promising me that we could get 2 other commissioners to vote for it, but I do have 1 other commissioner, so I have 2 votes. I'm not sure that I have 3, but anyway, but I don't want to push forward on it, and I don't think the association does, unless we have unanimity in the community.
Yeah.
So
a lot of work. Yeah, a lot of work needs to be done before the commissioners would be approached on this.
Right.
And then, you know, of course, the pandemic arrived. And
right.
then, you know, we were going to have educational events and go around to various groups and explain what a corporation would do, but then we couldn't do that. So it's on the back burner right now, but it's not forgotten. Okay, are there any other questions about either the 2 presentations tonight? And if not, I will continue. Okay, so what's coming up on Pine Island that we can get involved in? So at our September general meeting, which is going to be happening on Tuesday, September 14th at 6:30, and this one also is going to be happening at the Methodist Church, both in person and online. We're going to revisit the proposed new kayak launch site in St. James City across from the Flamingo Bay development, as we mentioned before. We had 1 public information meeting about this site, but due to online difficulties, the major presenter was not able to participate. And both the developer, which is the Conservation Foundation, and the Gpica requested an additional meeting to explain things fully. So that is going to happen at our September general meeting. And Nadine has put the particulars there in the chat. So the Conservation Foundation is asking to amend the future land use map from coastal, rural, and wetlands. They want it amended to conservation lands, uplands, and wetlands. So they want to change it from coastal, rural to conservation lands. And they want to also rezone the property from agricultural to environmentally critical, and get a special exemption to permit accessory structures and impervious surface areas, a parking lot, and a boardwalk in the environmentally critical zone. So they want to put a boardwalk through the mangroves, quite a distance to where kayaks would be launched. And then the parking lot would be an impervious surface. They also have some unspecified, quote, development order plans, and we don't know what those plans are. But Pine Islanders should attend that meeting in order to ask questions. And just like with the Publix site, we will vote on each aspect of the project, just as we did with the Publix site. So the email reminder will come out, and the announcement will also be in the Eagle and on our website, gpica.org. Then, in addition, the purchaser of the Bocilla Island site, now this is another whole issue, right? Where Captain Conn's is located, apparently intends to put up 50 manufactured homes. And I believe Noel has the latest word on what's going on there.
Well, he was on TV earlier this week talking about, actually, I think it was probably Friday of last week, but he was talking about, he was from Philadelphia. He was an investor. He was buying the site. And I don't know, the site was for sale for 8.9 million, but he had a pre-application meeting with the county, and we got an audio version of the meeting, and it was 30 minutes long. Listened to it. A couple of real important things came out of the meeting. County staff told the applicant that the Florida Department of Environmental Protection was no longer permitting package plants, wastewater plants on Pine Island. So staff said, Ben's, they're no longer permitting because they wanted to do a package plant to serve the 50 homes. And they were told that because the property was in the Lee County utility service area, that they would have to run a central sewer line to the property. And the central sewer line would have to be 7 miles long because the line only goes to the center. So when you take a few $1 million there, and you take a $8 or $9 million purchase price, I don't know what they're going to do with the property, but they're not going to put 50 mobile homes on there because it's in the coastal high hazard zone. And I don't believe the state or the county wants mobile homes to go back into that area. But if they decide to go forward with that plan, they have to have another public informational meeting on the island. They have to vacate the existing development order. They have to start all over again at square one with a new development order, which gives the public an opportunity to comment and also an opportunity to appear before the hearing examiner. So it would be a long way before they would ever get anything approved for that process. So we'll have to wait and see if what the new version is. They say they're still going to close on the property, that they were going to close on the property August the 10th. And they had originally told Captain Conn's they would have to close August the 12th. But since this became public and they might need Captain Conn to go to bat for them, they said, we're not terminating your lease. So that's where we are on that project.
Okay. Right. So are there any questions about that particular development on Bocilla Island? Yeah, that is an important one for a number of reasons, but the residents down there near that site along Main Street have been quite worried and upset about any development, almost any kind of development that's been proposed there. They did seem to like a previous version. I don't know if it's the same buyer or if it was a previous possible buyer who wanted to put a limited number of high-end condos there. But all of a sudden that idea disappeared, and then we got this 50 manufactured homes thing. You know what happened to that buyer, Noel, if that was somebody else? Or
okay, what happened is the applicant on that project was the owner of the property himself. Oh. And a lot of times what the owner of a property will do is they try to anticipate what the market is going to be for that property. So they'll go in and spend the money, put a plan on the property, then they try to sell the property with the plan. And that's what happened is they tried to sell that property with that plan of 25 condos, and it just doesn't, the math just isn't there.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Nor is the septic system.
nor is the septic system.
Right.
Well, speaking of septic systems, unless there are any other questions or comments on this project, we do have, go ahead, William.
Yeah, I was told from, well, I'll just say Loretta, I was up there looking at it. I do air conditioning, but
Okay.
she said that she had spoke with the new owners and they are letting her stay there for 2 more years. So,
Oh, so this is Captain Conn's?
yes.
Oh, okay. 2 more years. Okay, so that, yeah, quite a few people.
That's how long it takes to get a new development order.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure. Then they want to keep that money coming in, but that's good news for locals that like to go there.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of people really have a heart for Captain Conn's and really use it as a destination. So
that's good news. I just wanted to share that.
Thank you.
That's good news. Thanks.
Any other comments? Okay, so talking about septic to sewer. So on the GPICA board, we have put together a committee to look into what it would take to convert all the little septic tanks on the island to a proper sewer system. And we've been at this for some time. And we do have an update, I think, on what this committee is doing. And I wonder if Nadine or somebody else who's on the committee would like to talk about a little bit about, or even Sue DeHote, if you're still here.
I'll give an update, Helen.
Okay.
Put a few.
What you found out in your research and what's the next step in this?
I'm just gonna give a broad overview of what we've been doing. So we started looking at some of the issues that were important to community residents. And of course, water quality is one of the key issues for a lot of us who live out here. Obviously, we can't influence state, federal, and even oftentimes Lee County Commission rules when it comes to water quality and some of the fertilizer issues and water release issues that are taking place. So we're looking closer to home to see what we can do in our own little backyards. So we thought we would take a look at septic. We know that the majority of islanders have septic tanks. In fact, I have the number. Let me just call up another file. The Lee County estimates that there are some 4,500 to 5,000 septic tanks on Pine Island. So that's a lot of septic, and there's a lot of potential if people aren't upkeeping that's going right into our waterways. So Sanibel Captiva recently received county funding to have a septic to sewer conversion study conducted for their community. And what we thought we would try to do is gather information about our situation here in order to help encourage Lee County to fund a similar study here on Pine Island. I think everybody knows we have a wastewater treatment plant on the island. However, obviously it doesn't serve most of us. The plant serves 2,000, about 2,300 customers. It has 808 connections and 90% of those are residential. Most of their clients or their users, their customers are from Matlacha. They've got some part of Cherry Estates are hooked up to sewer, Pine Island Center, and a few other areas. But again, the majority of residents here on the island are still stuck with septic. So anyway, we decided to get a committee together. We want to support improved water quality for the waters surrounding our island. And so what we've done so far, we toured the wastewater treatment plant and gathered information about what their capacities are. We've identified the existing package plants on the island and looked into, what the situation was in terms of violations. Mike Sweeney did that, and Sue DeHote has gone above and beyond and gathered all kinds of data and information about water quality parameters in the areas surrounding the island. So we're gathering all that information. We're going to present it to Pamela Keys at, she's the director of Lee County Utilities, and use that to encourage her and to encourage the county commission to really look at Pine Island. At the same time as we were doing all of this, the Lee County Commission has recently authorized Pam's department to undertake a countywide septic to sewer conversion study. And so we're moving forward because we want to make sure that Pine Island remains or gets to the top of their list in places that they're looking at. We don't want to be an afterthought. We think our issues are important and they're countywide issues. And so again, we're working to, raise our stature, if you will, on this issue to Lee County staff and to the Lee County Commission. So I think that's about it.
Well,
any questions?
Thank you very much, Nadine, for that. You can see the amount of work that has so far gone into this, both by board members and by interested members of the Gpica or just interested people who live here on the island. Thank you for your participation in this. Karen Clark is asking, what is the capacity of the wastewater, excuse me, the wastewater treatment plant?
They're permitted to process up to 500,000 gallons per day. And they are currently processing 130,000 gallons per day. But they could also, they're permitted up to 500,000 gallons, but there are things that they could do to even expand that further if they needed to.
Okay. Any other, yeah, Sue.
Yeah, I'm curious. Right now, currently, and actually since probably May, there have been some serious health issues with people in Matlacha as a consequence of algae-related toxins. And I'm curious if there's any way that information would be useful to this presentation to the Lee utilities. We've done water quality sampling, but the consequence of a lot of pollution in the water is algae blooms, and we're now seeing that. And we're also seeing people get sick. I'm in touch with 2 individuals who have both been hospitalized and both had to move off the island at their doctor's advice to prevent them from getting sicker. And they're in touch with others, mostly people who work on the water, who are also experiencing symptoms. So just curious if that would be useful as part of this discussion.
Sue, I think we could use that issue in terms of pointing out the connection between some of the things we're looking at in terms of septic, which is what increased
nutrients, nitrogen. Yeah.
Thank you. Increased nutrients flowing into the water. And while those nutrients themselves don't cause the algal blooms, in most cases, not the real toxic ones, they certainly contribute to the length of them and to where they're appearing and and to whether or not they, eventually wash out. So yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Well, I think that they're two separate issues completely. What's happening, Sue, over in Matlacha is the Cetus barrier was removed, and there's over 100 square miles of Lee County that drains into the Spreader Canal, and the only outlet is right there at the bridge. So all of the pollution coming from thousands and thousands of septic tanks in Cape Coral. There's no sewer in the North Cape, and all of that is coming right into the Spreader Canal. And when we started doing testing several years ago, Matlacha Pass was not impaired for nitrogen, and now ever since they took the barrier out, it's impaired for nitrogen. And is dying in there, and that's a water quality issue that's related to the water quality coming out of Cape Coral.
Okay, yeah, I mean, we don't know what's causing the specifics of the nutrient pollution. We haven't done enough to know that. And it could confuse the issue. So if you think it might be, something that is not useful, that's fine. I just wanted to bring it up.
Yeah, they already have, bins have already sewered Matlacha. We can't use that as an issue. The sewers, because all of Matlacha has been converted.
Yeah, well, I was following the bloom really started in the south end of Matlacha Pass. And
That's
then
the way the
moved-
water's going. The current goes south.
Right. So
I have
anyway, that's fine.
excellent aerial photographs
Yes.
that show the plume just as clear as can be. And it shows it coming right out of there, out of Spreader Canal, and going all along the west side of the bridge and going all along the west shoreline of Matlacha Pass south.
Okay.
Noel, are those new aerials?
I got them from Calusa Waterkeeper. I could send them to you. Why don't I do that so you can post them? Yeah.
Yeah, I have a series of about a dozen photos, but they are throughout Matlacha Pass. And there might be some coming from the spreader area, but I know there was a huge bloom down at Tropical Point, probably 3 or 4 weeks before Matlacha got bad.
Well, we know we have a septic tank problem down there too.
I read that it was the seagrass that was dying that was causing this.
Well, there's this die.
No, there's an algae that coats the seagrass, so that doesn't help. But
yeah,
but it's a separate algae. It's a blue-green algae that makes toxins.
All right, so there's a question in the chat about sewer system maintenance and inspection. Deb Swisher Hicks, you want to elaborate on that?
Where I used to previously live, which was a system that was over 20 years old, it was actually 30 years old. And there was a problem in the neighborhood of sewer leaking. And they actually had to go through and clean out the system and video it, just to make sure that things didn't change over the years, settled and broke and so on. So I was wondering if that could be part of what we're working on, or is that a separate issue that needs to be brought up somewhere else?
The state had previously had a rule, and Noel can, you can remind me of the details. The state legislature had passed a rule that would require people with septic tanks to have them inspected and maintained every 5 years. And then the following year or before that could even go into effect, the new legislature came in and did away with the rule. I don't know, Noel, has there been talk of adding that in again or creating a new rule?
Yes. Actually, it was billed, but it didn't pass this session. But I think it maybe will next year. They're trying to figure out a way for it to work. They didn't like some of the rules that were established, but essentially, Charlie Crist was the governor. And they did pass it, and it was supposed to be every 5 years. But they had there's so many hundreds of thousands of septic tanks in Florida that they had so much pushback from the people that the legislature, the law is actually still on the books. It's just not enforced.
Hold on a second, Deb. I believe, Sue, did you send a message that you had your hand up? Oh, okay. All right. So back to Deb. Go ahead.
My question is more of the sewer lines that go to the plant. It's not necessarily all the little ones that are around that we have on our own lots. It's the big ones, the ones that go through Matlacha, that there could have been settlement somewhere and the pipes could be broken and so on. So it's the inspections of those pipes, the bigger ones.
The package plants and Matlacha, the pipes that go from Matlacha.
Okay, well, let me tell you that you would know that immediately because
change in pressure.
I tried to get the county to do a gravity system, which would have been great because that way you could tie your house into it. But the way it is now, it's a pressure system. So if you had a break or leak in the pipe, you would have waste spewing in the air or coming up right out of the ground because of the pressure. So all of the whole line is a pressurized system in each house. The reason you can't tie into it is you have to have a a lift station. If you don't have a lift station out front, then the sewer from the pressure line would back up into your house. And so it costs about $50,000 for a lift station. And so that's what you have to have in order to connect into this sewer line.
Oh, okay. So that answers it. I didn't know ours wasn't on a gravity. It's a pressure.
Yeah.
That does make a big difference. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to need to move on. Sue, if you
just real quick. So one of the comments from one of the people that's sick in Matlacha is that there's a lift station right at the corner of our street. It's on Island Avenue and May Street, or right up there north of Pine Island Road. And I went out there a couple days ago. It does smell. So I guess my comment was, do we know about the inspections on that lift station, and is it functioning correctly?
Okay, well, okay, go ahead. No,
that's just something we need to check into. That's all.
That was just recently checked here in Phillips Park.
Right.
I believe Helen.
No, this one's in Matlacha.
Yeah.
No.
You can check with the DEP. They have an inspection record on it.
Yeah. Okay, we can look into that.
Yeah, all of this can be done by the committee, and if you have, oh boy, we're getting some kind of feedback here. If you have any questions.
Can everybody mute their phones, please, and their computers?
Okay, if you have, oh no, I'm muted.
You're embarrassing.
Okay, we're going to try this again. Still. Okay, if there are any more comments about the septic to sewer, just contact us and we'll talk with you individually. We'll be really happy to do that. There's Matt and Rachel would like to provide some additional information on Matlacha algae. You want to go ahead and do that, Matt?
Yeah, thanks, Helen. First off, my name's Matt. My wife and I are new. This is our first meeting. We joined as lifetime members last month. This is our first meeting, but yeah, no, glad to be here and appreciate everybody's involvement. Yeah, so we live in Matlacha, spent quite a bit of time here, and so very familiar with the issue that I believe it was maybe Susan that brought it up. And so we've been researching this quite a bit. Specifically, this is a different type of algae. We actually went up and met with some scientists up in Tampa to get a bit more information on it. But it's actually Lyngbya. It's I believe that's how you pronounce it. It's spelled Lyngbya. It's a different type of bloom. And it is actually in large quantities lethal. And there's not a lot of people talking about that on the island, but again, this is the larger brown algae that rises to the top of the water and floats and smells almost like raw sewage. So this is not blue-green algae. This is not red tide. It's a different type of algae, and it's been specifically very, very heavy in the southern parts of Matlacha, like was being discussed. But it's quite toxic, and it's also very toxic to eat fish. And so again, it's not being talked about a whole lot. So the issues that we're experiencing, like elsewhere, some of the other algae issues throughout the state that are being discussed are a little bit different. But the issue specifically that's occurring in South Matlacha is Lyngbya. And so, again, it's more about raising awareness of that. What it's caused by is, again, some of the same similar issues: increase in nitrogen, probably some runoff and things like that. From Cape Coral, that they get, in the canals, which is again why it's affecting the southern part of Matlacha. It's closer to Cape Coral, but it's very, very toxic. So again, I think it's something that needs to be talked about more. And so that's kind of one of the things. Is like a lot of people are talking about it and saying, oh, it's the blue-green algae or it's the red tide. It's a very, very different algae.
Yeah. Okay, that's great information. And if you'd like to talk directly with the members of the Septic to Sewer Committee, just contact us through info@gpica.org and say what you'd like to do, and we'll hook you up. We'll get you in touch. Okay, I'd like to move on if we can to the transportation issues. You know, we have a whole bunch of balls that we're juggling in the air at the same time now. But we did have a meeting with the staff of the Lee County Department of Transportation, and a number of the board members met with the director, Randy Searchy, in Fort Myers, along with several members of our island's Chamber of Commerce and at least one small business owner from Matlacha. And the purpose of the meeting was to discuss possible solutions to the traffic jams that we experience at the four-way stop and in Matlacha during the winter months. And Mr. Searchy shared a traffic study that was a few years old that had been done at the four-way stop and gave us some ideas of his own for improving traffic flow during through that intersection. However, as we all know, most of the problem originates in Matlacha, where pedestrians, parked cars, slow-moving traffic can all clog the area. And this will become even more problematic if and when a bike path or a mixed-use path is constructed between the four-way stop and Birdstore Road. Now, that mixed-use path seems to be very popular. People really want that to happen, but you can imagine that it will create more discussion and hopefully some movement on what to do with the traffic problem in Matlacha. So we have invited the director of the Lee County Department of Transportation, Randy Searchy, to present his ideas at our October general meeting. So if you all would start thinking about that, and please come to that meeting and have, you know, your ideas and suggestions and questions for him. I'm starting to keep a list of all the things that we've been talking about that might help ease the traffic situation, including, you know, one of the latest people I talked to is a longtime resident who says, well, people just have to be more patient, you know. So, I mean, really, that's kind of a, well, let's just leave it the way it is. And maybe people can figure out on their own how to avoid going off island at peak times, or even as, you know, as often as they do. So that's what's going to happen with the traffic study. Are there any questions or comments about that? Mike Sweeney, I see you have your hand up. Mike, you need to unmute yourself.
That date is October 5th. Is that correct?
Sorry, say it again.
October 5th.
Do we have that date exactly?
That's
Maybe?
correct, October 5th.
I thought that would be that Tuesday. Remember, we had talked about meeting late in September and then early
that's right.
October.
That's right.
So, okay.
Yeah, it is the 5th. Yeah.
Okay, good. All right.
Okay. Anybody else have a thought about that? Okay. And finally, I just wanted to celebrate the fact that Pine Island Road really has been improved. This is one of the things that we talked to Randy Searchy about and wrote him repeatedly about. I was going to try to go out there and get a photo of it, but it really just looks like a nicely newly paved road, whereas before it was all crumbling at the edges and it was getting to be quite dangerous with potholes and all kinds of things. So citizen involvement works, you know, and even though it can be frustrating, it can be time consuming, please be involved, because that's the way we're going to preserve and protect what we have here on Pine Island, which is really very unusual in the state of Florida. So finally, time for announcements. I have a couple, maybe other people might have some. One is that we are revising the bylaws of the GPICA, and we have formed a bylaws revision committee that has been working on revision of the bylaws. Those revisions will go to the board. The board then will make their own ideas and suggestions and possible revisions. And when we all agree, then those revisions will come to you, the general membership, for discussion and approval. And this is kind of, I don't know, I hope it shouldn't be too time consuming, but it can get to be that way. But the idea is to regularize everything, make sure we're following all our own rules, that our own rules really reflect what we should be doing. And that's what we're trying to do with that. And then the second announcement is maybe for Nadine. It's just a reminder of the new fee structure for membership, which will be in place in October, I believe on October 1st. Is that right, Nadine?
That is correct.
Okay.
So currently member dues are $10 per person. We're changing our structure to be a number. Thank you. $15 per person and $25 per couple.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've also instituted a new lifetime membership, which I have to thank Matt and Rachel for being our first lifetime members. It's $300 per person and $500 per couple.
So if you are
pay your dues now.
Yeah, exactly. If you're not a member, pay your dues at the cheaper rate. And the way you pay your dues is you can go online. And Nadine, you want to tell how?
Yep. Go to our website, and under join, that gives you a form you can fill out with your information, and then you can mail us a check to our PO box, and addresses on the site. We are working to create an online payment system, but it's not up and running yet. We're hoping to have it finished before October.
Okay, great. Are there any other announcements? Okay, since I don't see anybody's hand raised, would somebody like to call to move to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Is there a second? Okay, all in favor? Raise your hand or yell aye.
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 Okay. Anybody opposed? No. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody, for your attention.
Excellent meeting.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
And we hope to see you all shortly.